Texas is enormous. 268,000 square miles, big enough to contain most of Western Europe with land left over. Most people know one version of it. Oil rigs, interstates, a few big cities strung along the highways. They drive straight past the rest. Out past those highways, there is a quarry on a mesa in the Panhandle where mammoth hunters dug 700 pits into the stone, and the tools they made from it turned up as far away as Montana. There is a cattle pasture in central Texas where archaeologists have pulled 2.5 million artifacts from 3% of a site and left the other 97% untouched. There are 3 earthen pyramids standing in the East Texas pines, sealed shut and walked away from 700 years ago with no explanation surviving in the record. And there is a stone wall running beneath 20 square miles of a Texas county with what look like windows and doorways set into it that has been studied and argued over since 1852. Stick with us to the end, because that wall is number 1 and the argument has never been resolved. This is the channel where we take the place's history files away and stops asking about. If you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. Today we are counting down 10 ancient structures in Texas that people cannot quite explain. Some have clearer answers than others. All of them are real and all of them are still standing. Let's go. Number 10. Fate Bell Shelter, Seminole Canyon. The oldest library in North America. To reach it, you descend. Along U.S. Highway 90 in Val Verde County, where the Edwards Plateau, the Chihuahuan Desert, and the South Texas Plains converge, the ground opens into jagged limestone canyons carved by the Pecos and Rio Grande. The shelter at the bottom of Seminole Canyon is not a small overhang. It runs for roughly 150 yards. At its deepest point, the ceiling rises 40 feet above you. People have been in this canyon for somewhere between 10 and 12,000 years. Fate Bell Shelter itself holds evidence of 8,000 years of continuous human occupation, from roughly 7,000 BC to AD 1500. The floor is not really a floor, it is 10 feet of compressed human life, food debris, woven mats, sandals, tool scraps, ash, the accumulated remains of roughly 25 people at a time over generation after generation, layered down across millennia. And on the walls, they painted. The rock art here belongs to the Pecos River style, the same pictograph tradition found along this stretch of river country. The oldest radiocarbon date at the site is 5,500 years. The most recent is 1,465 years ago. 4,000 years of continuous painting by people living in the same shelter their distant ancestors had occupied. The park superintendent described it plainly as the oldest library in North America. Looters reached the shelter before professional archaeologists did, and the floor the University of Texas first excavated in 1932 had already been dug through in places. Nearby, Bonfire Shelter, within the same 2,000-acre park, is documented as the oldest and southernmost bison jump in North America. You can still see Fate Bell on guided tours, Tuesday through Sunday, down into the canyon and back up again. 10 feet of compressed human time underfoot. That is what 1,000 generations looks like when it has nowhere else to go. Number 9. The Paluxy River Man Tracks. The footprints that tried to erase evolution. In Somervell County, a few hours southwest of Dallas, the Paluxy River runs through a landscape of cedar and limestone. Glen Rose, the nearest town, has a population of about 2,000. For decades, it built its identity around something in the stone riverbed, not just the dinosaurs, but a claim that ran alongside them. The dinosaur tracks are real and they are extraordinary. The Paluxy holds one of the densest concentrations of fossilized dinosaur tracks in the United States. Most were left by an Acrocanthosaurus, 15 feet tall, 7 tons, walking through here roughly 113 million years ago. The other claim was that human footprints sat right next to them. Not metaphorically close. Same layer, same stone. If true, it would mean humans and dinosaurs shared the same mud, and the entire geologic timeline would need to be rewritten. It was not true, but the way it fell apart is worth knowing. After a paleontologist named Roland Bird publicized the tracks in 1939, a creationist geologist became convinced he was looking at giant human footprints from the time of Noah's flood. A 1960s film, Footprints in Stone, carried the claim into hundreds of American schools. The evidence kept not holding up. Under scientific scrutiny, the supposed human prints turned out to be infilled dinosaur heel impressions, erosion marks, and some outright carvings. During the Depression, local people had dug tracks out and sold them, and some had improved the toes with a chisel. One investigator sat down with a local and was told directly that the man who found a particular print had admitted working on the toes to make them look human. The claim has since been dropped by most creationists. The genuine tracks are still there. A 2022 drought dried the river and exposed even more of them. Dinosaur Valley State Park preserves them today. The mystery was never the dinosaurs. It was how badly people wanted the other thing to be true. Number 8. The Alibates flint quarries. 700 holes in a Texas mesa. Stand at the top of a mesa above the Canadian River in the Texas Panhandle and look at the stone covering the ground. Chips and shards everywhere in colors that have no business being in rock. Pink, maroon, orange gold, a vivid red, a deep purplish blue, pale gray, banded and striped, almost marbled. It looks like gemstone. It is technically agatized dolomite, and it is found concentrated on roughly 60 acres atop this mesa in a 10 square mile area. Nowhere else on Earth. People figured this out roughly 13,000 years ago. Clovis mammoth hunters were here first, using this stone to make the points that killed Columbian mammoths on the high plains. After them, cultures came and went across millennia. The Antelope Creek people lived along this stretch of the Canadian River from approximately 1150 to 1450 CE, quarrying flint across generations, digging hundreds of pits into the mesa to reach the higher quality stone beneath the weathered surface. Those pits still exist, more than 700 of them up to 25 feet across and 8 feet deep. Wind and rain have filled their edges over the centuries, and today they sit as shallow depressions across the mesa top. But you can count them. 700 hand-dug holes left by people who came to this one spot across 13,000 years. Here is the scale of what they were doing with it. Stone tools made from alibates have been found as far north as Montana and as far east as the Mississippi River. Up to 50% of the lithic material at some prehistoric sites in southern Kansas traces back here. A 60-acre patch of Panhandle Mesa was the raw material for much of the continent. When Francisco Coronado rode through the area in 1540, the Antelope Creek people were already gone. Nobody has determined where they went. The quarry pits they left behind are still up there, and the stone they extracted is scattered across North America, ranger-led tours only, by reservation. The monument covers roughly 1,000 acres. The stone is gone from the mesa and scattered across a continent. It is still out there. Nobody brought it back. Number 7. The Paint Rock Pictographs. 1,500 paintings on a half-mile wall. A limestone cliff runs for half a mile along the north bank of the Concho River in Concho County, Central Texas, 70 feet high, about 2 miles outside a town of roughly 300 people. Most people driving through have never heard of it. The cliff carries roughly 1,500 painted images. Every one of them was made by hand, with pigments ground from the land. Red, yellow, and orange from iron oxide ochres. Black from carbon. White from chalk. Mixed with water and applied to stone. It is still there. Artists from different groups added to this wall across the centuries, among them the Jumano and the Comanche. Some of the paintings may be 1,500 years old. A University of Texas at Arlington archaeology team was still out mapping pictographs in 2026, working on a record that has never been completed. Obsidian found at the site was traced back to sources in southern Mexico, which means this stretch of the Concho River was sitting at the end of a trade route running hundreds of miles. Some panels were not placed randomly. Multiple images at Paint Rock interact deliberately with the movement of shadows on specific calendar days, the cross-quarter days, the midpoints between solstice and equinox. The cliff faces south. Certain angles of light arrive only 4 times a year, and certain figures line up with those shadows. The wall is a calendar as well as a canvas. The ranch it sits on has been in the same family since the 1870s. A man bought the land specifically to protect the pictographs from the vandalism he had already seen happening to them. The family runs guided tours. You visit by appointment. They mix the land into paint, put the paint onto the land, and 1,500 years of it is still readable. Number 6. The Hudnall Pyle Mound Complex. The Ring of 8 hidden in the pines. Here's the thing. In the 1930s, a Works Progress Administration survey team moved through the oak hickory pine forest south of Longview along the Sabine River in Rusk County and filed a report on this site. The report described it as a single medium-sized earth mound. One mound. That was the entire entry. Under the heavy forest on the river terrace, they had missed 7 others. What actually exists at Site 41RK4 is a ring of 8 ceremonial mounds arranged around a central plaza, built during the early Caddo period, roughly between AD 900 and 1200. From this center, priests or chiefs governed the surrounding farming communities, collecting tribute and maintaining ceremonial control over a large territory. There is evidence that temples once stood on top of the mounds. This was a capital. The misidentification was the best thing that ever happened to it. While other Caddo ceremonial centers across East Texas were looted throughout the 20th century, burial goods dug up, grave sites stripped, artifacts sold at collector shows and on the black market, this ring of 8 mounds sat quietly under the trees, largely intact because nobody understood what it was. When archaeologists grasped the site's real scale in the 1980s, it was substantially undisturbed. The Archaeological Conservancy acquired it in 1986. It is a protected preserve today, not open for public visits. The mounds are still there, grassed over, circling an open plaza on a Sabine River terrace. Sometimes the only thing standing between a 1,000-year-old thing and the people who would destroy it is a clerical error. Number 5. Hueco Tanks. The 200 Watching Faces. 30 miles east of El Paso, the Chihuahuan Desert opens flat and pale in every direction. Then something rises out of it. 3 distinct hills of jumbled syenite formed when magma pushed up through older limestone roughly 34 million years ago and later eroded into hoodoos and hollow-faced boulders. Those hollows, huecos in Spanish, catch and hold rainwater. In a desert, that is everything. People recognized this roughly 10,000 years ago, and they have been coming here ever since. The first thing archaeologists documented was the scale. Hueco Tanks holds more than 3,000 pictographs across its boulder faces, in crevices, under overhangs, in sheltered alcoves that require real effort to reach. Among them are more than 200 painted masks, or face designs. That number represents the largest concentration of ceremonial mask paintings in North America. 3 distinct cultures added to the site in sequence. Desert archaic hunter-gatherers first, painting geometric designs and hunting scenes beginning several thousand years ago. Then the Jornada Mogollon, an agricultural people who painted the masks somewhere between AD 500 and 1450. Then the Kiowa, Apache, Comanche, and Tigua in the historic period. Here's the wild part. For a long time, scholars assumed the Mogollon created those masks during the later phases, around the 1200s. Then carbon dating pulled 6 of the pictographs back to as early as AD 620. That date matters because the masks closely resemble the ceremonial Pueblo Kachina figures, and the Kachina tradition was long thought to have originated in Arizona in the 13th century. The early dates from Hueco Tanks suggest the tradition may have begun here in West Texas several centuries earlier than anyone believed. Some of the masks are not easy to find. They are tucked into spaces so tight that reaching them requires sliding under overhangs and squeezing between boulders. They were placed in the hardest spots to stumble across. The site has been a National Historic Landmark since 2021. Access to the paintings is by guided tour only. 200 painted faces, put in the hardest places to reach, still doing exactly what they were made to do. If you are finding this interesting, give the video a thumbs up and let us know in the comments which of these you would actually make the drive to visit. A mesa full of ancient pits, a shelter with 10 feet of human debris, or a canyon wall with a calendar built into it, your answers help us know what to cover next. We have 5 more to go, and the entries from here get harder to put down. Number 4. The Gault site, the oldest rooms in North America. In a grassy cattle pasture along Buttermilk Creek near Florence, Texas, On the Williamson-Bell County line between Georgetown and Fort Hood, perennial springs flow out of the Edwards Plateau. For as long as people have been in central Texas, this valley offered the two things they needed most: clean water and an enormous natural source of high-quality stone for making tools. That combination made the Gault site a place people returned to over and over, across a span of time that archaeologists are still working to fully measure. Since systematic professional excavations began in 1993, more than 2.6 million artifacts have come out of the ground. Clovis points, scrapers, animal bone, and engraved stones carrying geometric patterns, spirals, grids, cross-hatching, fine lines cut with the edge of a flake. The Clovis Age engravings have been dated to roughly 13,000 years ago, and they are the earliest securely dated portable art objects in North America. At last count, Clovis Age engraved stones of this kind are known from only 2 other sites in the entire Western Hemisphere. Here is the number that stops people cold: 2.6 million artifacts from approximately 3% of the site. 97% has not been excavated. In 2002, excavators working in what is called Area 12 uncovered something unexpected: a rectangular gravel pavement, roughly 6 feet by 6 feet, buried deep in the site with artifacts of at least Clovis Age on and around it. The lead researcher described the indications from surrounding data as evidence that it had a structure on it. If the dating holds, it would be among the earliest man-made structures yet documented anywhere in North America. Then the picture changed again. Below the Clovis material, and which already pushed the story back 13,000 years, excavators found stone points and tools that fit no known North American culture, dated between 16,000 and 22,000 years ago. The Clovis culture was for decades considered the opening chapter of the human story in the Americas. These artifacts underlie it. A researcher who published the results in the journal Science Advances in 2018 said of those points, "We have not found anything else like them. Not anywhere." For most of the 20th century, the theory called Clovis first held that humans arrived in North America around 11,000 years ago. The material from Gault's deepest layers pushes that back by at least 5,000 years, and possibly more. It does not just move a date. It raises questions about who those earlier people were, where they came from, and what became of them, questions that have no settled answer yet. The archaeologist who led the excavations from 1993 to 2015, Michael Collins, purchased the site personally in 2006 and donated it to the Archaeological Conservancy. More than 2,300 volunteers participated in the digs. Guided tours are offered monthly through the Bell County Museum and the Williamson Museum at $10 a person. 97% of it is still in the ground. Whatever is down there, structure, artifact, record, room, nobody has seen it yet. Number 3. The White Shaman mural in the Pecos River style. The 4,000-year creation story. A former professional artist named Carolyn Boyd spent years working in the limestone canyons of Val Verde County in southwest Texas, where the Pecos River meets the Rio Grande. In September 2012, she hiked half an hour over cactus-strewn stone, carried a portable microscope down into a canyon, and sat in front of a 26-foot painting on a cliff face she had visited perhaps 100 times before. What she was trying to read, and eventually argued she had, was the oldest pictorial creation narrative in North America. The mural is called the White Shaman. It faces due west, cut into a shallow alcove overlooking the Pecos, and it carries over 100 painted figures. Anthropomorphs ranging from 3 inches to more than 20 feet tall. Headdresses, feathers, staffs, red, black, yellow, and white paint layered and overlapping across centuries of addition. By reading the sequence of paint layers through a microscope, Boyd argued that the figures follow strict rules and a fixed iconographic vocabulary. Her conclusion, published by the University of Texas Press, is that the mural tells a single story: the birth of the sun and the beginning of time. She also identified what she believes is deliberate solar alignment. The figures line up with the movement of light and shadow on the solstices, meaning the wall completes itself twice a year when the light arrives in exactly the right way. In 2025, a study published in the journal Science Advances used 57 radiocarbon dates to establish the timeline of the broader painting tradition this mural belongs to, the Pecos River style. The results were startling. The tradition began between roughly 5,700 and 5,400 years ago. It ended approximately 1,000 years ago. The same visual language, essentially unchanged across more than 4,000 years. There are over 200 sites in the lower Pecos Canyon lands carrying this tradition, some with panels 100 feet long. Boyd's interpretation, that this is a written creation narrative, is not universally accepted. But no alternative framework has been put forward that accounts for everything she documented. You can see the white shaman on a guided tour through the Wheat Museum's preserve after a walk over exposed stone and a descent into the canyon. The mural has been there, on that cliff face, for 2,000 years. They have been telling the story the whole time. We just arrived late. Number 2. The Caddo Mounds at Alto. The pyramids East Texas forgot. Around the year 1300, the Hasinai Caddo did something deliberate. They placed clay caps over the ceremonial mounds they had built across the previous 5 centuries, packed up whatever they were taking, and left. The clay caps are still in the soil today as the only surviving record of that decision. Nobody knows what the decision was based on. The Caddo had been building here since approximately AD 780 in Cherokee County, 6 miles west of the town of Alto. 2 platform mounds and 1 burial mound, raised entirely by hand from soil dug and carried in quantities that archaeologists still describe carefully, because there is no small way to phrase it. The site sat on a major pre-contact trail that the Spanish would later call the El Camino Real de los Tejas. The road was already there when the Caddo arrived. They placed their ceremonial center on it deliberately. For 500 years, this was the most advanced society within the boundaries of present-day Texas. Then around 1300, the clay was laid down. Climate shift and resource pressure are the working hypotheses for the departure. Neither has been confirmed. What is confirmed is that the clay caps show it was not a sudden collapse or a disaster. Someone made a plan. The plan was to leave. The site was protected and studied across the 20th century. Then a tornado tore through in April 2019 and nearly destroyed it. Here is the part worth holding. The Caddo Nation of Oklahoma, the living descendants of the people who raised these mounds, partnered with the Texas Historical Commission to rebuild. In May 2024, after a new $2.5 million visitor center was completed, the traditional Caddo grass house on the grounds was raised back up by 5 female Caddo apprentices and more than 20 members of the Caddo Nation. The same inherited knowledge used to reconstruct the same structure across 700 years of separation. Texas is estimated to have roughly 65,000 known archaeological sites, some going back at least 13,000 years. Standing earthen mounds that you can walk around, actively co-managed by the descendants of the people who built them, are rare. This one is open. 3 mounds rise low and green from the piney woods, connected by a walking trail. A segment of the old Camino Real runs behind the property. They did not flee. They sealed the door. And 700 years later, the people they left behind came back and opened it. Number 1. The Rockwall of Rockwall. The wall under the town. Start with what you would actually find if you went looking. You drive east out of Dallas, maybe 30 miles, into a county that looks like every other commuter county in North Texas. Subdivisions, gas stations, a strip mall at every exit. The flat, spread-out geometry of a place that grew quickly and kept growing. Rockwall County is one of the fastest-growing counties in the entire Dallas-Fort Worth metro. There is nothing visibly unusual about it from the road. Then, you find a spot where someone has cut into the earth. A trench, a foundation dig, a place where the ground has been opened far enough. And there, in the wall of the excavation, a few feet down, is stone. Flat-faced, set in what looks like courses, running left and right into the undisturbed soil in both directions. It is vertical, it is stone, and it does not look like it belongs to the ground around it. It looks built. That is the feeling that has been driving this argument for 170 years. Benjamin Boydstone and 2 other men were digging a well in 1852 when they struck it. Over the years that followed, more sections turned up across the county, stretching beneath roughly 20 square miles. The town that grew up over the formation took its name from it. Rockwall County is named after a rock formation, the only county in Texas for which that is true, and the formation they named it after is the one nobody could fully explain. From the beginning, the question divided everyone who looked: natural or built? The scientific community came down on one side early and held it. A geologist examined exposed sections in 1874 and called them natural. In 1901, Dr. Robert T. Hill classified the feature as clastic sand dikes, sheets of sediment forced upward into rock fractures and hardened over long periods into wall-like slabs. The vast majority of geologists since have agreed. This is what certain sediment does under certain conditions. It happens to produce something that looks, uncannily, like dressed stone. But it never stopped looking like dressed stone. A handful of investigators across the decades pushed the other interpretation. In 1996, an architect who studied the exposed sections concluded that the evidence for a man-made structure was mounting. A geologist later documented what he described as linteled portals, apparent window openings, and a stone-lined passage leading to a vaulted chamber. Then the claims reached further. A 1949 excavation reportedly produced a stone-bearing, ancient-looking markings that were said to match a coin pulled from soil estimated to be hundreds of thousands of years old in an Illinois well in 1870. That last chain of claims has no verified evidence supporting it. Mainstream geology does not accept it. Anyone telling this story honestly has to say that clearly. What remains, after the hoaxes are set aside and the credible science is credited, is this: a formation running beneath 20 square miles of a Texas county that looks, from most angles, like it was laid by hand. That produces, in certain cuts and excavations, features that trained observers have described as architectural. And that has been studied by professional geologists for over a century and a half, classified, explained, filed away, while never quite convincing every person who walks up to an exposed section and stands there looking at it. Sections of the wall have been exposed for viewing at various points over the years. Much of it lies under private property. The county and town share their name with it. The debate and the formation persist. Somewhere under the lawns and the parking lots of one of the fastest growing counties in Texas, the wall is still down there. Nobody built it. Nobody can quite let go of the feeling that somebody did. Texas holds a stranger archaeological record than most people realize, and most of it is still being deciphered. For me, it is number 2, the Caddo Mounds. The image of those clay caps laid carefully over the mounds before the Caddo walked away. A deliberate closing, with no explanation surviving to the present day. Which entry surprised you most, and what ancient site in Texas did we miss? Tell us below. Subscribe if this kind of history is what you came here for.